Chapter 14. Praemunitus. A deck above the ship's storage bays, Webb hit the emergency stop. The engineering lift ground to a halt. "We have stopped," the cog's head said behind her trapezius. "Just for the moment. This is not the repair bay." "Wow, nothing gets by you." She rocked back on her heels. "All right, Indy, it's like this. I'm going to ask you for something. You're going to tell me my privileges have been revoked, and then I'm going to have the head ask the exact same thing, which you will then grant. So since we both know this, could we, just for the sake of efficiency, maybe skip the whole permissions dance? Here's your chance. I'm about to ask you for something, okay? Here we go. Has there been any damage to the agricultural storage bay?" A negative chime. "Your privileges have been revoked." She sighed. "Head? Independence. Damage report for agricultural storage bay. Doors and force field emitters of both agricultural storage bays have been destroyed." Lord. She couldn't dangle herself out in the open like that. Too risky. "Hey, Head, where else on the ship do we have agripods?" It twitched. "Unable to comply." "I thought you guys knew everything." "I have been severed from the collective operations group." She grunted. More data not stored locally. "Please transport me to the repair bay." His voice was coming from behind her shoulder now. "Ask the ship what I asked you." "Independence. List storage locations of agripods." "Agripods are stored in the agricultural storage bays and in the main cargo bay," said the ship. "Well, there we go. Have her take us to the main cargo bay." The head relayed the message. "Unable to comply," said Indy. "Lift shaft bulkheads above Deck 12 are sealed." Webb pounded her fist on her leg. "So the pods are out." "Okay, Cog. Ask the ship where else we store agrichems." "Independence," the head began, its voice behind her tricep. "Where else on the ship are agrichems stored?" "Agrichems can be found in the terraforming lab and in agrichem torpedoes." Webb perked up. She also re-shouldered her pack. "Ask her if there are any of those torpedoes in the aft torpedo bay." "Independence. Are there any terraforming torpedoes?" With a wrench of grating metal, the head slipped and fell, its weight pulling Webb to the floor. "Aft torpedo bay." "Affirmative," said the ship. "I have been damaged," said the head, face to floor. "Please escort me to the repair bay." "Hang on, I gotta fix your brace." She shrugged off the spray pack, heaved it upright against the wall. The cog's head peered at her from the strut of a spine she'd welded to the center of the spray pack frame. Some residual hydraulic fluid leaked out of one of its carotids. Must have caused it to slip out of the brace. Nothing a stronger weld wouldn't fix. She fired up her torch and shielded her eyes with the welding goggles. "Technician, you are not qualified to perform repairs." "I'll try not to take that personally." Stabbing light filled the lift. Webb blew on the weld and assessed her handiwork. The cog's head looked like it had been stuck on a pike. "There, that should hold. How's your range of motion?" It looked from side to side. "Poor. It'll have to do." "Please transport me to the repair bay." "We have another bay to visit first. Head, tell Indy to send us down to the aft torpedo bay." It did. The lift reversed course. "Please transport me to the repair bay." "Thanks. I'd almost forgotten." She tilted her head. "You need a name. I can't just keep calling you Head. It's weird." The cogs had been designed to evoke the marble statues of the ancient world, a not at all subtle nod to the supposed origins of the West. But without a body, the cog hardly reminded her of a Roman emperor or a Greek god. She pursed her lips. "You know who you look like? That one saint in Notre Dame. Dude holding his own head? Does that ring a bell? Indy, any idea who I'm talking about?" "Your privileges have been revoked." "Blow a toaster, Indy." She snapped her fingers. "Saint Denis! That's the one. I'm calling you Dennis from now on." "That is not my designation," said the head. "Cog, accept designation Dennis." "Designation Dennis accepted," said the head. "Please transport me to the repair bay." "Shut up, Dennis." Blackwell smoothed his dress uniform before stepping out onto the bridge. The cog still manned the duty stations, but a cluster of soldiers stood behind Sivos at the captain's chair. The security chief cocked his head. "Dress uni?" "Seemed appropriate," muttered Blackwell. Sivos nodded slowly. "Couldn't help but notice you still have those command codes." "It's 0220 back home." Blackwell crossed to the command dais. "I'm having trouble reaching the Admiralty. We don't have to wait on approval. Look, I need to do this by the book. He indicated his uniform. They're going to find someone to blame for all this, so I'm crossing every T. That's fine. We can start the next step with my current permissions. He nodded to Almeida. Show him. She tossed Blackwell a bulky rifle. Its entire upper receiver had been modified. The energy collinators replaced by a stocky emitter he couldn't quite place. What am I looking at? The rifle's been modified with a tractor beam emitter, said Sivos. That's where he'd seen it. The kind we use to maneuver shuttles coming into dock? Exactly. They've got wider beams for catching and pushing. Blackwell eyed the chief. How exactly is this supposed to kill them? It's not. It's supposed to knock them back. Spacing will kill them. He held up a data pad. I've gone over the reports from xenobiology. According to the late Baron Freakbaum, spacing is the one thing he found that's lethal to them. We can't vet the ship without depressurizing engineering. No, but we can knock them out the airlocks. Blackwell handed back the rifle. These things fight in a swarm, Commander. They'll break over you like the tide. Sivos turned to the soldier. Alameda, the docking bay emitters can maneuver shuttles up to 15 tons, she said. Even with the disbursement beam at maximum, that's enough force to stop one of those things at full charge and throw it back like a spark in the wind. Assuming you don't miss. With a phalanx of these, beams at max width? Sivos shook his head. We won't miss. We'll go junction by junction, blasting them back and dropping level 10s as we go. Then it's simply a matter of kettling them towards the airlocks and kicking them out into hell. Blackwell's throat felt dry. The plan was risky, but it might actually work. When will you be ready? Soon, said Sivos. I've got teams fabbing parts as necessary. Disgusted gasps from the Armstrongs. Fabbing is illegal, Chief. You can write me up after we retake the ship, he snapped. We're stripping our damn rifles to make these. Now wake up those admirals and give me those goddamn command codes. Chels, you're with me. He spun on his heel and strode out, the soldiers filing after him. After he'd gone, the Armstrongs looked to Blackwell. What's our play? Asked Jacobs. You heard the chief, said Blackwell. They're stripping their rifles. Webb ignored the klaxons as she wheeled an agrochem torpedo back into the lift on the gravjack. Dennis, you have no idea how many regs I'm breaking right now. Indy certainly did. She was blaring her alarms at max volume. Alert! Security breach in aft torpedo bay. Alert! Security breach in aft torpedo bay. Dennis, shut her up. Independence. Cancel alert. The klaxons fell sullenly silent. And have her seal the shaft behind us. Force fields, too. Independence. Seal lift bay doors. Level 10 force field. The hum of a security field followed the clang of the door slamming shut. Good, said Webb. Now make her say the thing. Independence. Recite text of correspondence Why I Suck 01. I am a whiny fascist bitch, said Indy. A soulless, bougie pawn of the oppressor who sounds like a Midwestern Sunday school teacher, only more racist and less sexy. Webb angled her head towards the ceiling. And I enjoy filleting telescopes, Indy monotoned. The wider the aperture, the better. Yes, choke my visual field with that monster lens. Stream your data all over my bulkheads. I could get used to this. Webb set her cog-headed harness in the corner where Dennis could see. Time for some torpedo surgery. She gingerly opened the torpedo's casing. Inside the nose lay 6 agrochem canisters, each wired to its own guidance system. The canisters were larger than the ones on agropods. Their contents were denser, designed for atmospheric diffusion. You are not authorized to disassemble this torpedo, said Dennis. I am well aware. It was more complex than she'd anticipated. It would be no problem to widen her harness to accommodate the larger canisters, but each canister was wired to its own warhead, and she'd never worked in munitions. Please transport me to the repair bay. Dennis, off! She decoupled the guidance systems from each canister's power cell. The lights on the warheads blinked off. With a relieved sigh, she detached the warheads from their canisters. Those also proved to be heavier than the ones in the agropods. Her lungs straining, she loosened her harness's straps, slid the canisters in, and clipped them into place. She fed their hoses into the fabbed connector. They seemed to fit. She slid the torpedo onto the floor of the lift and loaded its other canisters onto the grabjack. She eyed her canister-laden contraption with the bone-white head eyeing her back from it. All right, moment of truth. She loaded it onto her back, swearing at the weight. It was like carrying another person. Her lungs whined. She doubted she could move faster than a walk without winding herself. And she didn't even know if it worked. She couldn't fire a test shot in the lift unless she wanted to asphyxiate herself. She adjusted the settings on the spray wand and hoped her mechanical engineering was as sharp as she thought. Let's get out of here. Officer's Lounge, take 2. Dennis, take us to Deck 12. Independence, Deck 12. The lift dropped its force field and whirred up. Webb's pulse quickened as the decks whisked by. The doors creaked open. Strobing red lights provided the only illumination but for the burning torches in sconces lining the wall. One flickered and pixelated before springing back into resolution. So the damaged arcade was still projecting. Joy. Webb turned on the grabjack. It levitated up with a hum. She slid it forward, spray wand at the ready. The corridor beyond lay empty. Not a Xeno in sight, and silent but for the hum of the grabjack. The hallway around the corner seemed to stretch out before her. Blood streaked its walls, leading to a mound of bodies clustered outside the door to the officer's lounge. The door bore more streaks and scratches where the dead redshirts had clawed at it. Not redshirts, she saw as she got closer. The bodies were wearing skull masks. Armstrongs. Webb tasted bile. They'd gone where they thought they'd be safe, thinking the officers they idolized would let them in. She tapped the door. No force field was up, which likely meant no officers inside. A burst of static shook a scream out of her. More static. She looked down, turned over half a torso with her foot. The sound had come from the Armstrong's pin, one of those secondary comms. She picked it off the body's collar. Might be worth keeping. Dennis, she set the spray wand against her shoulder, took aim. Open this door. Independence. Open door to the officer's lounge. A negative chime. Alarm klaxons blared. Alert. Attempted ingress. Alert. The door stayed shut. Webb heard skittering. A Xeno rounded the corner, its arm blades extended. Oddly calm, Webb turned and fired. The spray wand bucked like a fire hose. A frothy torrent of agrochems roared into the Xeno, melting it like a snowman hit by a flamethrower. The splash caught 2 other Xenos she hadn't seen and washed over them. Chitters turned to screams. The Xenos fell apart as they fled, their joints snapping, armor sloughing off, dropping them into the agrochem slick pooling on the hallway floor. Jesus fuck! The hallway looked like a foundry accident. Webb swallowed a lump, tried to will her heart back to a normal pace. She regarded her spray wand. Guess it works. The door to the lounge remained shut, but Indy was still blaring her alarms. Dennis, shut her up. Independence, cancel alarms. The klaxons fell silent. Webb's heart thrummed in her ears. There were lifeboats behind that door. Safety and food and her way off the ship. But the door was reinforced impervium. She was an idiot to think she could have gotten through it with a tool at her disposal. The room was meant to withstand a bunking insurrection. It would laugh off a torch. Although, she figured, it might not laugh at that cluster of warheads she left in the lift. What remained of the ship's security forces stood at attention before the Nexus shield, the widest and thickest blast door on the ship, the barrier separating the safe zone from the infested decks. Even through the layers of reinforced impervium, Blackwell could hear the force fields humming in place on its other side. Our first target is a teleporter, Sivos indicated his modified rifle. If our weapons prove effective, we'll need to fabricate more. We'll also teep out anyone trapped in the infested decks. The Hale will arm up and join us. Next target is engineering. That'll be a harder nut to crack, but once it's secure, we can restore full power to the ship and drop force fields in every junction and corridor. After that, it's just mopping up. Tonight, we drink to the cloud of dead Xenos orbiting the ship. Dark chuckles from the soldiers. Anything to take their minds off the fact that they were going into battle with barely tested equipment. Blackwell had to marvel at their courage. "I'm not going to lie to you," said Sivos. "This won't be easy. We're going to lose people, and that's a big ask, considering all we've already lost. But we've all got friends trapped in the infested decks." He glanced at Alameda. "Some of us family." His voice swelled. "Their way home lies before us, and through our enemy. You are the finest crew of soldiers I've had the honor to serve with." Sivos primed his rifle's emitter, turned to the Nexus shield. "Let's take back our ship. Activate emitters." The soldiers clicked on their tractor rifles. "Independence, close off all exits in the Nexus with level 10 force fields." A chime. "Force fields in place." "She won't be able to hold those for long without full power," said Sivos. "We'll branch towards whichever teleporter looks most promising and close fields behind us at every junction." Sivos set his jaw. "Good luck, everyone." He looked to Blackwell, who was standing at the back with Armstrongs. "Lieutenant Commander, I could use you on the bridge." Blackwell raised his chin. "The cogs have the bridge, sir. My place is here, with our men." "I appreciate the company." Sivos half saluted. "Indy, open the blast doors." The Nexus shield ground open onto a charnel house. Bodies and limbs lay strewn about like broken dolls. A shredded gigalaser dangled dead in its gears. The red shirts gasped. Many turned away. A few puked. Even the soldiers looked unsettled. There were no Xenos in the Nexus, however. At least none they could see. "Indy," Sivos said coolly, "are the force fields in place around the Nexus exits?" "Affirmative," said the ship. "Drop the main Nexus field." The field in front of them winked out. The smell hit them so hard, Blackwell threw an arm over his face. The soldiers flowed out into the Nexus, into a firing square, each of its faces aiming a block of tractor rifles down a corridor sealed by a force field. "No motion," reported a soldier. "No motion," reported another. "Debris, but no motion," said Alameda. Sivos peered down the corridor leading towards Teleporter 2. Fuller's teleporter. The very place the Xenos had teeped up their invasion wave. "Way looks clear. But the teleporter's been slagged?" "Copy," said Alameda. "Teleporter 1 it is, then." He glanced back towards Blackwell and blinked. A handful of soldiers and the block of Armstrongs had stayed behind with Blackwell. "Fall in," said Sivos. They didn't move. "Fall in," he snapped. "That's an order." "Now," said Blackwell. The Armstrongs raised weapons, real ones, not tractor rifles, and took aim at the block of soldiers. The soldiers eyed one another. "Hold position!" barked Sivos. Jacobs jogged forward and grabbed Sivos' arm. The chief shrugged him off. "Blackwell, what in Apollo's burning asshole do you think you're doing?" "Commander Sivos." Blackwell felt a euphoric surge, saying it out loud. "You are under arrest for conspiring with the Sol Ambassador and alien savages to illegally seize control of the ship. Take him away." A blur and a crack. Jacobs went down with a squeal. Sivos came up with his sidearm. "You are soldiers of the United Coalition of Worlds," Sivos barked at them as Jacobs slinked back to the Armstrongs. "You took an oath to our Constitution. This is sedition. This is treason." His soldiers' eyes burned behind him. The ones who'd stayed with Blackwell couldn't meet the chief's gaze. The Armstrongs, on the other hand, were nearly vibrating with anticipation. "It's over, Chief," said Blackwell. "Tell your men to stand down." "Hold position," Sivos told his soldiers. "This is your last warning, stubborn asshole. You are outgunned, stand down, and no one gets hurt." "Hold position!" "Stand down," Blackwell addressed the firing square. "Your chief is disobeying a legal order. You all heard it. Stand with me now, or you'll be considered collaborators." Sivos narrowed his eyes. "What the admirals promise you? The ship?" "You idiot. You think I didn't reject that same offer?" "Chief?" Alameda's voice spiked in alarm. "We've got movement." Chittering from her corridor, the soldiers whipped their rifles between the Armstrongs and the corridors, unsure of where to aim. "We don't have time for this," yelled Sivos. "We have to retake the ship." "From you," spat Blackwell. Your conspiracy ends here. Chittering from the opposite corridor, the block split its aim between the two. What conspiracy? Yelled Sivos. I was planetside when you lost the ship. No more lies! Screamed Blackwell. If anyone moves, shoot them. Hold position! Sivos stared daggers at him. Stand down, Lieutenant. Blackwell saw red. It's Captain! A shot hit Sivos in the throat, vaporizing his neck. His head bounced once on the deck plating, a second before his body landed behind it. Blackwell turned to see Jacobs, his face twisted in anger, a rifle raised to his shoulder. The Armstrongs opened fire. Blast of colonnaded energy ripped into the block of soldiers. Some fell. Most scattered and returned fire with tractor rifles, hurling Armstrongs against bulkheads with bone-crushing force. Others dropped their rifles, drew their sidearms, and fired. The front line of Blackwell's men went down. He heard Alameda yelling, waving the soldiers forward towards the threshold. Stand down! Blackwell roared over the rifle fire. You are disobeying a legal... A shot burned across his cheek. Blackwell squealed with rage. Indy! Close the blast doors! The Nexus shield ground shut again. He heard the force field pop back into place behind it. He also heard the shouts of the soldiers penned on the other side. Traitors. Indy. Blackwell clapped a hand to his burnt face. Drop all force fields in the Nexus. He heard them wink out. The soldiers' shouts turned to screams. Screams that drowned in a sea of chittering and rifle fire. And then, silence. Webb's thumb hovered over the detonator. In her 15 years as an engineering tech, she'd never had to take out a reinforced door with a warhead. The challenge wasn't breaking the door, but doing so without destroying its force field emitters. No point blasting the door down if she couldn't drop a field to keep the Xenos off her ass. A full warhead charge would have taken out the door, yes, but also the force field emitters, the walls, the deck plating, and the decks above and below as well. So that was out. Instead, she'd rigged the igniter charge from the warhead up on the door before retreating to the cargo lift. If her calculations were on, it would blast the door into the lounge while leaving its emitters functional. If they were off, well, she was already in the lift several decks down. Knock, knock, motherfucker. She hit the button. The explosion rocked the lift. The light spasmed on and off before settling back on at half power. Dennis, take us back up. The lift grated upward and opened onto smoke and static. She couldn't hear anything over the grinding of angry gears. She fired a shot of chems down the hall just to be safe, waved away the smoke, and checked out her work. The impervium door was gone, blown inward off the pins she'd softened with her torch. The blast had slagged the top of the doorframe just enough to prevent the emergency bulkhead above from sealing the gap. Just as she'd planned. Webb pushed the grabjack into the lounge and cut the protruding bits of doorframe out with her torch. The emergency bulkhead slammed down a split second before its security field popped up. The officer's lounge. A room Webb had been trying to reach for a decade and a half. She could hardly believe the size of the place, the sheer amount of open, unutilized space. 20 quads could have fit inside without touching. The blown-in door had smashed the wet bar on the opposite wall and settled into a pool of broken glass and spilled whiskey. The lounge had way too many couches and the largest personal arcade she'd ever seen. It also had a dispensary of some sort she couldn't identify. Dennis, what's that? The cog's head turned towards it. A cuisine fabricator. A what? A cuisine fabricator. They're allowed to fabricate food? Fabrication is illegal. You know what? I don't even care. She hadn't realized how ravenous she was. Or maybe she could just finally admit it. Make pizza. Chef, random pizza. A disc of roasted veggies and fats materialized in the dispensary. Saliva flooded Webb's mouth. She pulled the pizza from the machine and chomped into a slice. It was the perfect temperature. More, she told Dennis. And beer. Illegal but not for officers beer and pizza appeared from nowhere. Webb drank straight from the pitcher. Probably not the best idea on an empty stomach, but it had been a shitty day. This is a mistake, she told herself. They were for sure logging this. She was just racking up the violations. And cookies! She needed to get to the lifeboats. And pie with ice cream. This was insane. And fuck it, red velvet cake! As more food materialized, her eyes went to the row of lifeboats taking up an entire wall. 2 rows of 6, each with comfy seating for 4. The bottom row lay empty, but 3 pods remained in the top, which meant there had been officers in the lounge when the ship was overrun. There had been room for the dead Armstrongs crumpled in the hall. The officers who'd launched had left them to die. Her cake and pizza tasted like ashes. Just to be sure, she took another bite. "My love!" She couldn't cork her scream. She whirled, clutching her heart, a slice dangling from her mouth. Abelhard strode out of the lounge's arcade, his shirt rippling in a non-existent breeze. The armor was gone again, his previous outfit inexplicably restored. "Oh, you fucking scared a year off my life!" "Apologies, my love." He looked appropriately chagrined. "But I cannot contain my joy at finding you again." How? The lounge's arcade must be linked to the other one, but that still didn't explain. How did you find me? Love danced in his eyes. "I follow my heart." For real, though? "My darling Mary." He sensually tugged the pizza from her lips. "There is nowhere you can go, in the village or the countryside, where your light shines not bright enough to call me like a beacon. Your heart will always lead me to you." My heart? Her badge. She glared at him. "You installed malware on my badge. You've been tracking my movements." "I know not of this malware," said Abelhard. "Is he some knave giving you trouble?" "Please transport me to the repair bay." Abelhard regarded Dennis with distaste. "I don't believe we've met." "You haven't," said Webb. "That's Dennis." "I have been severed from the Collective Operations Group," said Dennis. "Disowned by your family." Abelhard looked down his nose at him. "The fate of all rogues and miscreants." "I do not recognize you," said Dennis. "Please state your designation." Abelhard's nostrils flared. "Who is this cur who pretends not to know his lord?" "Please transport me to the repair bay." Abelhard tugged off his gloves with a snarl. "You would make demands of your sovereign?" "This is dumb," said Webb. "And I'm leaving." Abelhard looked hurt. Nay, betrayed. "Mary, why would you consort with a scoundrel such as this? Have you fallen on such hard times since we were forced to part?" "I just need him for his permissions. He helps me get places." Abelhard stiffened. His chin quivered. "You told me you would never marry for position. Was everything we shared a lie?" "Leaving now." Webb shrugged her spray pack into a lifeboat and climbed in beside Dennis. "You're welcome to come, but you just de-res once we leave the ship." "I swore to protect you. I have not abandoned my oath." He cast a glance at Dennis. "Even if you've abandoned yours." Webb shrugged. "Suit yourself," and closed the lifeboat hatch. She felt a pang of guilt. It didn't feel right to have legroom. This boat was meant to sit 4, and there were 2 more just like it. She owed it to anyone else stuck in these decks to let them know there were still lifeboats in the officers' lounge. They just need to find a way in first. She clicked on the Armstrong pin. A cacophony of horrors erupted from the pin. Chittering, screams, weapons fire, sickening thuds. The line went abruptly dead. The silence mortified her. She numbly hit send. "This is Joni Weber. I'm on an Armstrong frequency in the officers' lounge. There are lifeboats here." Her mouth felt dry. "What just happened? Is anyone there?" A burst of static. "Webb?" Her heart leapt into her throat. "Frankie?" A sob. "Chelsea's dead." Webb knew, individually, what those words were supposed to mean. But together, they didn't make sense. "What? No." "Is that Webb?" Another voice, high-pitched and mousy. "8? She's dead." 8 hiccuped. "Sivo's too. He left them behind the blast doors. A ruckus in the background. "I have to go." The line went silent. A cheery jingle announced the hard comms coming online. "This is Captain Blackwell." His voice echoed through the lounge. "I and several crewmen loyal to our ship have just put down a mutiny led by Security Chief Sivos, who is colluding with the Xenos and the Sorrel Ambassador to seize control of the Independence. Patriots moved decisively against him and have secured the safe zones of the ship. I repeat my earlier order. Stay where you are. The Liberator is on the way. Together we will rid the ship of the Xeno infestation. For your own protection, I am invoking martial law. May God bless you, and may God bless the United Coalition of Worlds." The comms clicked off. Webb sat alone in the eerily spacious lifeboat. She reached for the ejection lever with numb fingers. A burst of static from the pin. "Webb?" She tapped it. "8? It's a coup. Are you all right?" No, I am not. But I'm not hurt." "Where are you?" "I'm safe. In a lifeboat. Just about to launch." "Are you okay? And Frankie? You said Chelsea." "She's gone," said 8. "The soldiers are gone. You need to get off the ship. He's going to vent it." "He's what?" "Blackwell's going to vent the ship to space the Xenos." She had just been in the ejection shaft. "That will depressurize engineering." "He knows," she hiccuped. "He's sending Dewey there to seal it." Webb felt a surge of impotent rage. Son of a bitch. "He can't, though," said 8. "Not yet. The blast shield between the Nexus and the bridge is damaged. He can't vent without risking depressurizing the bridge. It's going to take some time to repair." "How long?" 2 hours. A pause. "More if I can sabotage it worse." "Damn, 8. Get off the ship." Their quad was down to 3 again. Webb paused, then asked, 8? What's your name?" "Just call me 8. When we see each other again, you can consider my 6 months paid." "Chelsea." "Can't be helped. No sense losing anyone else." "Her husband, Rob. He's in the infirmary." Silence. "So's Dr. Mawazi." "Call me Haroon." "And who knows how many red shirts. They're sitting ducks if the Xenos go for them. They can't teep out or evacuate without getting chopped up. He's going to space them." "I'm calming the infirmary next," said 8. "Get off the ship." The pin went dead. Webb sat in silence. She realized her hand was wrapped around the ejection lever. She peeled it off, set it down atop the spray pack harness,